The wind that curled through the Milwaukee streets that October morning was sharp and persistent. Not brutal, just constant. It whispered past brick facades and rusted gutters, rattling leaves from their branches in swirls of gold and copper. On Sycamore Avenue, the streetlights blinked lazily, as if reluctant to surrender the early morning darkness. A yellow school bus hissed to a stop at the corner of 6th and Sycamore. Its brakes sighed with fatigue. The doors opened with a clatter, but no one got on inside the narrow kitchen of a modest brownstone. Karen Holloway stood motionless by the window, her hands wrapped tightly around a chipped ceramic mug. Her eyes, dry and unwavering, were fixed on that corner. The corner, the one she'd stared at every weekday morning for the past 19 years. At exactly 7:12 a.m., the bus arrived. And just as it had every day since 2005, it left empty. Her daughter Emily had vanished at that corner. 7 years old, blonde, freckled, always humming some nonsense tune under her breath. She had worn a pink backpack and a blue scarf with little white stars that morning. The weather was crisp, and Karen remembered tucking the scarf a little tighter around her daughter's neck before she watched her skip off toward the stop. It was the last time she ever saw her. No camera footage, no witnesses, no screams. Just gone. Karen sipped from her mug, cold now, and placed it in the sink. Her movements were methodical. She hadn't lived in this house for years after the disappearance. She and Roger, Emily's father, had divorced within 3 years of the tragedy, but 5 years ago, Karen had come back, rented the house again. It felt like the only place in the world still connected to Emily. Like the only place that might still whisper some hidden truth if she listened long enough. She sat down at the worn kitchen table, a stack of envelopes waiting at her elbow. Bills. Mostly a few political flyers. One thick envelope without a return address, that one made her heart twitch. She turned it over. Plain white, handwritten, no name. She slit the top open with a letter opener, a silver one Emily had given her. On Mother's Day, the year before she vanished, inside, a single sheet of printed paper, a yearbook page, black and white, grainy, the text faint beneath the photos. But one picture had been circled in red ink, a young woman, auburn hair. Hazel eyes, a small dimple on her left cheek, smiling, Karen's. Breath caught in her throat. It was Emily. Or at least it looked like Emily would look now at 26. The same eyes, the same birthmark near her right ear, the same smile that never quite reached the right side of her mouth. The name beneath the photo was unfamiliar. Madison Carter. University of Illinois at Chicago. Class of 2024. Honors program. Sociology. Karen's hands began to tremble. Her chest tightened. There was a post-it note stuck to the top corner of the page. For words in shaky black ink, you were right. She's alive. Her vision blurred. She gripped the table to steady herself. Her knees threatened to give. For 19 years, she had lived in a vacuum of unanswered questions. In grief so deep, it had eroded her capacity to hope. She had prepared herself 1,000 times for news of remains found, bones in the woods, a final, dreadful confirmation. But this, a picture, a name, and a promise. Karen pressed the page to her chest and closed her eyes. Later that night, Karen sat on her living room floor. Papers spread out in concentric circles around her like a forensic sunburst. Her investigative binder, once untouched for years, now had new weight. The yearbook photo now slipped into a transparent sleeve at the very front. She'd made dozens of notes already. Names, searches, digital footprints. Madison Carter was real, at least on paper, but only from 2020 onward. No high school records. No childhood photos online. No trace of a Madison Carter before the age of 20-1. Karen knew what that meant. Madison Carter didn't exist before then. Not officially. Not publicly. Timeline was too clean. It was like she had been created. Just for college. And Karen knew her daughter. She opened a folder labeled Emily Personal Items and pulled out a crumpled photo from 2005 Emily in the backyard, grinning, wearing a bright pink jacket and the butterfly brooch Karen had given her on her 6th birthday. The brooch was unique, a custom order from a local artisan, with 3 tiny letters engraved on the back, EMH, Emily Marie, Holloway. Karen had never seen another like it until now, because in one of the blurry campus photos she found online, Madison Carter walking across a quad. The same butterfly charm dangled from the zipper of her backpack. Karen printed that photo too. She zoomed in until the pixels broke apart. There it was, same design, same color, even a faint scuff. Mark on the left wing. She compared it to the one Emily had dropped at a gas station, just 2 weeks before she disappeared. It was the same brooch. It was impossible. It was proof. She opened her journal, cracked leather, pages yellowed with time, and wrote in green ink. I don't know how, but I know it's her. The next morning, Karen stood at the edge of the University of Illinois at Chicago's campus, the wind tugging at her coat. Students buzzed past, laughing, late, headphones in, the rhythm of modern life, oblivious to her inner tremors. She hadn't been on a campus in more than 2 decades. Not since the day she taught literature at a small community college before Emily disappeared. Everything here looked clean, new, fast. But the photo in her bag gave her purpose. She headed toward the administrative offices. The woman at the front desk, a college student with heavy eyeliner and bitten nails, barely looked up as Karen approached. "Hi," Karen said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Looking for information on a student." "Madison Carter. I believe I may be a family member." The student blinked. "Sorry, we can't share any student info without documentation." "Privacy laws." Karen nodded. She'd expected this. "This could be a matter of safety," she added quietly. "Even a missing persons case." That made the student pause. 10 minutes later, Karen sat in a quiet office with Dr. Leona Vasquez, head of student affairs. Polished, graying, watchful. Karen slid the photo across the desk. Dr. Vasquez took a long look. Her brow creased. "Yes, that's Madison, smart girl. Transferred in sophomore year. Bright, polite, quiet, quiet." Karen inhaled deeply, "'cause I think she might be my daughter." Dr. Vasquez leaned back. "That's quite a claim." Karen didn't blink. She disappeared in 2005, no trace, nothing since. But that's her. I'm sure of it.
Dr. Vasquez
Glanced down again. "Well, I can't share her personal records, but I'll tell you this much. Madison's file was unusual. No typical background paperwork. Guardian enrolled her remotely. We never met them in person. A woman named Linda Carter." Karen's blood turned to ice. "Carter? Did she ever mention her past?" "Her family," Dr. Vasquez hesitated. "No, she said very little. She told one faculty advisor she was adopted, but she never elaborated." Karen swallowed. "Did she ever mention Anne? Accident? A memory loss?" "Only in passing. She told one of the counseling staff that she didn't remember anything before she was 10 or 11. A memory gap, a renamed guardian. A missing paper trail." Karen stood, her legs stiff. "Thank you, Dr. Vasquez." "Wait," the woman said. Softly. "Why now? What brought you here?" Karen held up the photo. "Someone sent this to me," circled in red, with a note that said, "You were right. She's alive." Dr. Vasquez paled. "You think someone's helping you?" Karen nodded. "Or warning me." That night, as the wind curled around the corners of her house like a secret trying to get in, Karen lay in bed staring at the ceiling. She clutched her locket, the same one Emily had kissed before heading to school that morning, all those years ago. She remembered Emily's laugh, high and bright. Her favorite bedtime story, Charlotte's Web. The way she used to whisper, "Good night, Mommy. I love you bigger than the sky." Karen closed her eyes, then they snapped open. Tomorrow was Thursday, the same day. Madison, if it really was Emily, had a sociology lecture at 2 p.m. Karen had checked the public course schedule, matched it to her own digging. She would wait outside just for a glimpse, just to see, not to confront, not yet. At 2:05 p.m. the next day, the doors to lecture hall be opened. Students filed out, chatting, checking their phones, and then She appeared, auburn hair, denim jacket, the butterfly charm catching the sunlight like a flare. Karen froze. The girl laughed at something a classmate said. The sound was so achingly familiar it felt like glass shattering inside Karen's chest. She took one step forward, but the girl walked past her without hesitation. Without a glance, without recognition. Karen's throat tightened, her voice caught. The moment passed. She stood there long after the students had disappeared. Back home, she tore through her attic, digging until she found the old jewelry box Emily used to keep on her nightstand. Inside, nestled between plastic rings and faded bracelets, was the original butterfly brooch. Still there, still hers. Karen stared at it, then at the campus. Photo, there were two identical, one-of-a-kind brooches. One aged, one pristine. Impossible, she whispered. But it was the crack in the lie, and she wasn't done digging. The first time Karen Holloway truly believed she might lose her mind wasn't in 2005, when Emily vanished. It wasn't even in the days, weeks, or months that followed. When the flyers yellowed, the hotlines went silent, and people stopped calling to check in. No, it was now, standing alone in the dark hallway of her rented house, staring at two brooches. Both were butterflies. Both were identical. Both were impossible. One she had just retrieved from the dusty plastic bin in her attic. Emily's original brooch, gifted by Karen and engraved with her daughter's initials. The other was in the blurry campus photo she had printed and pinned to her corkboard, swinging from the zipper of Madison Carter's backpack. She had checked the back of the one in her hand. The engraving was still there. Karen remembered. When she ordered it, small artisan vendor at a summer market. A one-of-a-kind gift. There was no way two could exist unless someone had copied it, or unless this one wasn't the original dot. Karen suddenly felt ill. She dropped into the nearest chair and stared at the corkboard. It was a mosaic of desperation, now blurry screenshots. Campus addresses, class schedules, a list of names from Madison's sociology cohort, a printed page labeled transcript request-denied. In the center, taped and creased. Madison. Carter's yearbook photo, circled in red dot, and beneath it, in Karen's green ink. She didn't grow up. She appeared. 2 days passed with no movement. Karen couldn't sleep. She couldn't eat. Every time she tried to work, lesson plans, grading essays, even mundane emails, her brain revolved back to one question. If that girl is Emily, why doesn't she know it? She had rehearsed what she'd say if she saw her again, if she confronted her. She revealed the brooch and waited for a flicker of recognition, but the risk was too high. If she was wrong, if Madison wasn't Emily, she could destroy a stranger's life. If she was right, and Emily had been manipulated into forgetting who she really was, forcing the truth to fast could fracture her completely. That's when the package arrived. Karen was sitting on her front porch, watching the bus pass for the millionth time, when she saw the manila envelope. No postage. No return address. Just K. Holloway printed in blocky, uneven ink. Inside, a cassette tape. No label, no note. No explanation. Karen stared at it for several seconds before scrambling. Inside to her closet, where an old tape player sat buried beneath scarves and tangled chargers. It took a minute to coax it into working. The tape hissed, crackled, wind. Then, a voice, high-pitched, terrified, whispering, "Mommy, I'm scared." The lady said not to talk loud. She said you wouldn't come, but I know you will. Know you ... Static swallowed the last few words, Karen. Dropped the player. She sat in silence for nearly 5 full minutes. Her body frozen, breath shallow. She played it again and again and again. It wasn't just a voice. It was Emily's voice. Young, fragile, familiar. The same tone Karen used to hear humming while Emily colored in the living room. The same slight lisp on her S sounds. This wasn't just a memory. This was a message. But who had sent it? Karen drove to the Milwaukee Police Department the next morning. She hadn't been inside the station in over a decade. The place still smelled like waxed linoleum and burnt coffee. She handed the tape over to a detective at the front desk. The man, young, distracted, clearly skeptical, told her it would be passed along. She left feeling like she had just tossed a flare into a black hole. That night, Karen opened her binder again and turned to the section labeled Leads, Cold. There was a name she hadn't revisited in years, Paul Jensen. He had been the lead detective on Emily's case in 2005, mid-40s at the time, gruff, detail-oriented, kind eyes. Despite everything, she Googled him, retired, living in Rhine, Wisconsin. Population, under 2000. She dialed the number listed on a faded neighborhood directory. 2 rings, then a voice. Hello? Detective Jensen. A long pause. Then, Karen Holloway. She swallowed. I didn't expect you to remember. I've been waiting for this call, he said simply. The next day, we drove 2.5 hours to a quiet house on the edge of a frozen lake. Jensen looked older, white hair, slower steps, but sharp as ever. They sat at his kitchen table while he brewed strong black coffee and listened without interruption as she laid out the timeline, the yearbook photo, the brooch, the voice tape. The guardian named Linda Carter. When she finished, he poured the coffee. I remember everything. About your case, he said. Never sat right with me. No witnesses, no camera angles, no ransom. It was like she disappeared between heartbeats. Karen laid down the photo of Madison. Jensen examined it closely. That's her, he said, no hesitation. Then she showed him the brooch and the copy in the photo. He whistled through his teeth. That's not coincidence. That's a trail. He stood and retrieved an old folder from his cabinet. Dusty, yellowed. The words, Emily Holloway, opened, still scrawled on the tab inside. He flipped to a photo. A blue Honda Civic parked half off the curb across from the school bus stop. Taken from a gas station security camera at 7:11 a.m., 1 minute before the bus arrived. You ever seen this car before? Karen stared. Yes, that's the station where Emily dropped the brooch, I remember. She was taken in under 60 seconds, Jensen said. No forced entry, just gone. He flipped another page. Single name highlighted from a dismissed. Lead, Sandra Carter, a nurse at a private clinic in Madison, who had disappeared from her job 1 week after Emily vanished. No forwarding address, no resignation letter. Karen's hands clenched the edge of the table. Carter, she whispered, had the same last name as Madison's guardian. Jensen nodded grimly. We thought it was noise at the time. Maybe. Now I think it's our missing link. That evening, they followed the only new trail they had. The address listed in the foster agency records Karen had dug up from the university archive file. It led to a rural property in Indiana, empty, abandoned, rotting under the weight of time, inside, dust, mold, silence, until they reached the upstairs bedroom. There, in a corner, they found a child's bed, a small journal, and a music box cracked, but when Jensen wound it, it still played a warped, tinkling lullaby. Karen opened the journal. Most entries were incoherent, scrawled. Almost nonsense, except one. Sometimes I feel like I came from someone else's dream. I don't remember before this place. Only the sound of the rain, a red backpack, a woman who said my name was Madison. Karen sank to the floor. It was Emily, she had remembered, even when she couldn't explain it. Back in Milwaukee, Karen stood inside Emily's untouched bedroom, the one she'd kept frozen for 19 years. She opened the closet.
On the top
Shelf, a sealed plastic bin. Inside, Emily's crayon drawings. One stood out. 3 butterflies, labeled, Me Mommy, Daddy Daddy. Karen traced them with her fingertip. She whispered, I'm coming, baby. I'm coming. Jensen dug deeper. Through old case files. Through an unofficial contact in Ohio who owed him favors. And then Breakthrough Harvest Home Services, a private adoption agency shut down in 2011 for ethics violations. One of its co-founders, Sandra Carter. Karen stared at the printout, her stomach twisted. It wasn't just a random abduction, it was a system, a network. A machine that took vulnerable children, erased their records, and placed them with false guardians under new names. Jensen. looked up. She didn't steal your daughter for ransom.
Oh,
She wanted to keep her, and she used the system to do it. Karen's hands trembled. I have to see her, she said. This time, I have to speak to her. The sky was pale and overcast when Karen Holloway stepped once more onto the University of Illinois at Chicago campus.
ow.
The sidewalks glistened from a morning drizzle, and students moved in small clusters, their laughter punctuating the air like static in an otherwise silent broadcast. Karen's fingers clenched and unclenched. Inside her coat pockets, as she waited near the south entrance of the sociology building, her heart thudded not in beats but in impacts, full, ragged strikes. She'd been here before, watching from the edge. But this time would be different. She was going to speak to her. To Madison, to Emily, at 2:04 p.m., the heavy lecture hall. Doors opened. Students streamed out. Karen saw her immediately. The familiar gait, the auburn hair, the butterfly charm swaying gently against the denim of her jacket. Emily, or Madison, stepped into the daylight, chatting with another student. She laughed. Karen moved, slowly, deliberately. She stepped out from behind the column and onto the sidewalk, directly in the girl's path. Excuse me, she said softly. Madison turned. Their eyes met. Karen could barely breathe. Her daughter's face, slightly older, slightly altered. But hers, yes, Madison said politely. Karen's mouth went dry. She tried to form the words she had rehearsed for days, something light, something that wouldn't alarm her. I thought you looked familiar, she said, forcing a weak smile. You remind me of someone? Madison blinked. Oh, really? Happens a lot, I guess. I get that sometimes. There was a flicker of discomfort behind her eyes. She adjusted her backpack slightly, already inching to leave. Karen swallowed. Do you mind if I ask? Do you remember much from when you were little? Madison froze. A beat passed, then another. Why do you ask? I know this sounds strange, Karen said, stepping slightly closer, her voice soft. But did you ever have a red backpack? Or a favorite scarf with stars on it? The color drained subtly from Madison's face. Her jaw tensed. I think you have the wrong person. Karen reached slowly into her tote bag and withdrew the butterfly brooch. The original. She held it gently, like an offering. You wore this the day you disappeared, she said. I gave it to you for your 6th birthday. Madison's eyes darted down to the brooch hanging from her own zipper. 2 butterflies, identical, one worn by time, one newer. Madison's breath hitched. She didn't move. She didn't run, but she looked like she might unravel completely. I don't understand, she whispered. How do you know this? Karen swallowed the lump in her throat. Because I'm your mother. Madison stepped back. No, my aunt raised me. She said my parents died in a car crash. She said I was lucky to survive. Karen blinked through tears. Did she ever show you a birth certificate? Or a death certificate for your parents? A police report? Anything? Madison hesitated. Karen stepped back, giving her space. I'm not here to ruin your life. I'm here because someone took you from me, and I think she made you forget. The silence between them was brittle and electric. Madison looked down again at the brooch. She told me not to ask questions. She said my memories were wrong. Karen's voice cracked. They weren't. Madison didn't say anything more. She turned slowly and walked away. But she didn't run. That night, Karen barely slept. She sat at the kitchen table, the brooch placed between her hands, replaying the moment over and over. She had seen it, the recognition in Madison's eyes, the confusion, the cracks in the narrative she had been fed her entire life. It wasn't. Over the next morning, she got a message. A simple text from an unknown number. I don't know what's real anymore. Can we talk? Karen stared at the screen, hands trembling. She typed one word. Yes, they met that evening at a cafe across the street from campus. Madison wore a hooded coat, her hair tucked behind her ears, and the look in her eyes was hollow but alert. She slid into the booth and wrapped her hands around the untouched cup of tea Karen had ordered for her. I don't know why I'm here, she said. You're here because you're brave, Karen answered. Madison's lips twitched. A smile. Then she looked down. I looked through my stuff last night. I have almost nothing from before I turned 11. No baby pictures, no drawings, just nothing. I never questioned it. But now, Karen reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She handed it across the table. It was Emily's drawing, the 3 butterflies. Me, Mommy, Daddy. Madison stared at it, her eyes wide. I used to draw this in my room, she whispered. When I was little, thought it was just something. I made up a dream. Karen's voice was barely audible. It wasn't a dream. Tears filled Madison's eyes. She wiped at them quickly. I don't know who I am, she said. Right. But I want to find out. The next morning, Madison met Paul Jensen at his condo. Karen was already there, flipping through files. Jensen offered coffee, but Madison declined. Instead, she listened. They showed her the documents. The yearbook. The agency records. The forged birth certificates. The letter of guardianship signed by Linda Carter, notarized by someone whose license had expired 2 years earlier. When Karen pulled out the cassette tape, Madison stared at it like it was a haunted relic. They played it, and the room went still. That's me, she whispered. I remember that voice. Jensen nodded slowly. We believe you were taken, renamed, and placed in the system under false pretenses. Your memories were suppressed, maybe psychologically, maybe chemically. Madison didn't speak for a long time. Then she said something that chilled them both. She used to hum to me. A tune. Every night. Karen's voice was barely a whisper. Can you hum it? Madison nodded, then began slow, halting. But unmistakable, Karen gasped. It was the lullaby she had sung to Emily. Every night before bed. Wordless. Just a soft melody passed from mother to child. Karen covered her mouth. Tears spilling over. That's mine, she whispered. I made that up for you. No one else could know it. Madison began to cry. I think I always knew, she said. They submitted the DNA test that afternoon. Jensen made the arrangements through a trusted lab in Madison.
Discreet.
Fast. 2 weeks. That's how long they would have to wait. In the meantime, Madison stayed at a motel. She didn't return to Linda Carter, didn't answer her calls. Karen visited her daily, sometimes for coffee, sometimes for long drives through Milwaukee's old neighborhoods. Madison asked questions. Karen answered them all. They watched old home videos, looked at photos. Karen showed her the blue scarf with stars. I kept everything, she said, because I had to believe one day you'd come back. Madison's voice shook. I didn't know anyone was looking. Karen gripped her hand. I never stopped. When the envelope arrived, it was plain. Sealed. No fanfare. Karen opened it in front of Madison. She read the words silently, then handed the paper to her daughter. Probability of maternity. 99.99998%. Madison Emily didn't cry. She just leaned forward, wrapped her arms around her mother and whispered, I'm home. The rain returned 2 days after the DNA results. Not a storm. Not the brutal downpour that had pummeled Karen's windows the night Emily vanished, but a slow, steady drizzle that slicked the streets and turned the city to silver. Karen had always hated this kind of weather. It clung to you, made you remember things you tried to bury. But that morning, it didn't matter. Because Emily, her Emily, was with her, they stood in the Milwaukee courthouse, side by side beneath buzzing fluorescents, filling out paperwork that would finally restore Emily's legal identity. A woman from Child Advocacy Services sat at a table nearby, flipping through documents. Paul Jensen paced quietly near the back, folded umbrella in one hand. The judge entered, an older woman with steel-gray hair and a weary kindness in her eyes. She scanned the petition, then looked at Emily. Is this what you want? She asked gently. Emily didn't hesitate. Double quotes, yes, Your Honor. I am Emily Marie Holloway. Karen pressed her knuckles to her lips as tears filled her eyes. They didn't go out to celebrate. Instead, they drove back to Sycamore Avenue, parked across the street from the old house where everything had begun, sat in silence. The neighborhood looked the same, almost eerily so. Mailboxes crooked at the same angles. porch lights still blinking. Even the oak tree near the corner leaned the same way, like it had been watching all these years. Emily stared out the window. I keep thinking if I just stand here long enough, something will come back. Karen didn't answer. Emily stepped out of the car. She crossed to the exact spot where the bus used to stop. She turned in place, closed her eyes, tried to remember. Karen stood beside her. You were here, she said, right here that morning. Emily opened her eyes. I see flashes. A car. A woman's voice. I don't know if it's memory or imagination. Karen touched her shoulder. You don't have to remember everything. I already know who you are. Emily turned to her. Am I still loved? Karen's voice cracked more than ever. That night, Emily stayed in her old bedroom for the first time. Karen hadn't changed a thing in 19 years. The pink wallpaper with tiny clouds, the shelf of dolls, the small desk with the crayon box still inside. Emily sat on the edge of the bed. She picked up the stuffed bear, Mr. Buttons, and held it to her face. It still smelled faintly of childhood, like dust and fabric softener and something lost. She lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Her body was tense at first, guarded. But the silence wasn't empty, it was safe. And sometime before dawn, she fell asleep without fear. The weeks that followed were fragile. Karen and Emily navigated each day like crossing a bridge made of glass. Some mornings were filled with shared laughter over coffee. Other nights, they barely spoke. There were days Emily avoided the house completely, walking the lakefront alone. And sometimes Karen stood outside Emily's door, her hand hovering just above the knob, unsure whether to knock. Paul Jensen came often. He brought files, names, notes. He still had contacts in child services even after retirement. And when he wasn't at the house, he sent texts, short updates about a network of fake adoptions, a handful of shady guardians, and the untraceable disappearance of Sandra Carter, also known as Linda Carter, who had completely vanished after Madison's Emily's disappearance from her care. But then something new arrived. A letter. No envelope. Delivered by hand, left on Jensen's doorstep, typed unmarked. There are at least 5 more. Same method. Same foster cover. You found one? Attached was a list. 5 first names. Partial dates. Student ID numbers. In one line, handwritten in a slanted script, you were never supposed to find her. Jensen called Karen. The moment he read it, they sat in his kitchen with Emily and studied the list. Who sent this? Karen asked. Jensen shook his head. I don't know. But they knew where to leave it, and they knew exactly how to get our attention. Emily stared at the list in silence. Then she whispered, I want to help find them. Karen turned to her. You don't have to. I need to. She said, the story broke in local news first. A simple headline buried between city council updates and minor crime reports. Woman reunited with daughter. After 19-year disappearance, college photo sparks missing person BREAKTHROUJHBOT. It didn't stay quiet for long. Within a week, state reporters picked it up. Then national. Karen's phone began ringing non-stop. Reporters, podcast producers. Even a documentary team out of Chicago. Everyone wanted the story. Karen only gave one interview, and only under the condition that Emily's identity be protected. She kept the focus on the system, on how a missing girl could be reclassified, renamed, and passed through institutions without anyone questioning it. But something else had changed. The tape. The forged files. Counselor's form from 2005 signed by Mark Danning, the man who had claimed Emily, transferred to another school. The counselor, who'd worked with Sandra Carter, it all pointed to one conclusion. Emily hadn't just been kidnapped. She had been erased. They found Danning living in a retirement community outside Rockford. He was thin, pale, his once thick glasses fogged with age. Jensen visited him alone. I don't remember much, Danning claimed. Lots of kids. Lots of paperwork. But Jensen pressed harder, showed him the old transfer form. The signature. The name Sandra Carter, and something in the old man's face changed. Fear. She said the girl was unclaimed. No family. Was just paperwork? Nothing more? She told you that? Jinzin asked. Dunna nodded. She worked at the clinic. She said she was clearing space for new cases. Said no one would miss the girl. Jensen didn't press further, just stood and walked away. He already had what he needed. They had built a system, one child at a time. Meanwhile, Emily had started journaling again, not like the ones she'd been forced to write as Madison, but real ones, in her own voice. Pages filled with dreams, fragments of memory, half-formed thoughts. She read parts of it too, Karen. Other pages she kept private. One entry simply read, "I am not what they made me forget. I am what I choose to remember." She folded that page and placed it inside the original butterfly brooch. Karen helped her pin it to her new backpack. 3 weeks later, they found the second girl. Her name had been Sophie Crenshaw, aged 7. Reported missing in 2008, she'd been re-identified as Riley. Adopted through another closed agency linked to Harvest Home Services. The same methods, same gaps. Same silence. Karen and Emily drove to Kansas to meet her. She was 24 now, tall, quiet, careful with her words. When Emily showed her the crayon drawing with the butterflies, Sophie Riley started crying. "I drew this too," she said. I didn't know why." The dominoes began to fall. Jensen worked with a private investigator. Emily volunteered with a missing persons support group. Karen gave 2 more interviews, using each one to push for investigations into foster systems with irregular transfers. 3 of the 5 names on the letter were traced. All were young women. All had lived under assumed names. All had birthmarks, scars, or features matching original. Reports from missing children between 2005 and 2011. The 4th was never found. The 5th had died in 2014, listed as a Jane Doe. Emily cried for her. For all of them. But something had shifted. She no longer moved through the world like a shadow. She moved like someone chasing the light that winter. Paul Jensen passed away in his sleep. He left behind a box for Emily inside, a single letter. "You were the one case that kept me up at night. You're the one that lets me sleep in peace. Find the others. Shine the light. And never let them shut it off again." Emily read it at his funeral. Karen stood beside her, arm wrapped tight around her daughter's waist. They buried him beneath a stand of oaks. The wind rustling through brittle branches like whispers. Emily went back to school the next semester, not as Madison Carter, but as Emily Holloway. She took night classes, psychology, trauma studies, juvenile law. She wanted to work with children who'd gone through what she had, or worse. One day, Karen found her at the backyard fence, holding Mr. Buttons in one hand, the butterfly brooch in the other. "You okay?" she asked. Emily nodded. Slowly, "I'm just thinking." "About what?" Emily turned toward her mother. Her voice was steady, soft, clear. "How everything I lost somehow led me back to where I started. Just different." Karen smiled. "Different doesn't mean worse." Emily closed her eyes. "Sometimes it means stronger." The snow came late that year, by mid-December. Milwaukee usually wore a crust of white across its roofs and roads. But that winter held back like the city itself was waiting for something to shift. Ice crusted the windows of Karen's house, and the wind snapped branches outside like brittle bones. But inside, the rooms were warm, lived in, whole again. Emily had moved in 2 weeks ago. "First, just for a little while," she said. "Until I figure things out." But each night she stayed. Each morning she woke up to the scent of Karen's tea steeping in the kitchen. She seemed to exhale a little more. They were rebuilding. Not as mother and little girl, but as women who had survived an impossible fracture and were now learning how to stand on the same side of the break. They didn't always speak about the past. Some days they sat in silence, reading in parallel or watching the wind press against the living room window. Other days, Emily asked questions she wasn't sure she wanted the answers to. Did I have a favorite cereal? Did I lose any baby teeth before? Did I used to hum all the time, like I do now? Karen answered every one, even when her throat closed up. Double quotes, yes. Yes, all the time. You used to make up your own songs. Emily smiled when she heard that. Not a big smile. It's just a flicker of recognition. Something familiar reaching across 19 years of forgetting. The night before Christmas Eve. Karen heard Emily humming in the hallway. She stood outside her daughter's door, listening. The melody was slow, looping, a tune Karen hadn't heard in 2 decades, but one she instantly recognized. It was the lullaby the one Karen used to sing. Wordless, when Emily was sick or scared. Emily had called it the Stars song. Karen didn't knock. She didn't interrupt. She simply leaned against the wall and closed her eyes in January. Karen received a letter from the Milwaukee Police Department. The investigation into Sandra Carter had officially been reopened now under her legal alias, Diane Larson. Authorities had traced financial records, Social Security inconsistencies, fraudulent foster placements across 3 states. Her last known location was a rental home in a suburb outside Des Moines. They found it empty inside. Few items remained: a stained mattress, a rusted filing cabinet, and a faded photograph in a drawer. The photo showed a young girl loomed mistakably. Emily, around 8 years old, standing in a sunlit backyard, holding a book upside down. Her smile was tight, not quite right. The kind of smile you learn to give when someone says, "Say cheese." But you don't understand why. The photo had been folded twice. On the back, in loopy script, "She's mine now." Jensen would have known what to do with that photo. Jensen was gone. Emily stared at it for a long time, then slid it into her journal without comment. The investigation spread. Karen spoke again with news media, this time as part of a broader push into reforming foster documentation audits. She worked alongside attorneys and child advocates, sharing every document, tape, journal entry they'd uncovered. Emily, meanwhile, kept a lower profile. She studied, volunteered, and at night, she cross-referenced names from the original anonymous list. They still hadn't found the 5th girl. Her name had only been partially visible. C__IE, born 2004, reported missing in 2011. No confirmed sightings. No confirmed identities. Just an idea. One more child stolen by the same machine. "I want to find her," Emily said one night over dinner. "Even if it's too late, even if we can only give her back her name." Karen hesitated. "You don't have to carry this." Emily looked at her. Her voice was quiet but steady. "I'm not carrying it. I'm owning it." In February, Emily drove alone to Ohio. Karen had offered to go with her, but Emily insisted. "I need to see it," she said. "The place where I was found." Foster record had been specific. Rural road near Hamilton County. 2010. A 12-year-old girl, Jane Doe, discovered walking along the highway with no shoes and no memory of where she came from. The sheriff's report at the time noted that she was quiet, cooperative, but dazed. Emily drove the stretch 3 times before pulling off onto a service road that led into a copse of leafless trees. There was nothing there now, just snow and silence. But something stirred. She climbed out of the car, walked into the woods, and stopped at a rusted road sign half buried in snow. For a moment, she stood perfectly still. Then she sat down in the snow and waited. Not for someone. Not for something. Just for memory. And it came not in full, but in flashes. A hospital hallway. Yellow paint. Cold air. A woman with a tight bun holding her hand. The words, "You're safe now. You're lucky. You don't need to remember." Emily whispered. Aloud, "I do need to remember." The wind answered with a hiss through the trees. She returned home the next day, pale and tired. Karen met her at the door. "Anything?" she asked. Emily shook her head. "Nothing new. But I think..." How it felt now. That's something. She handed Karen a stone. Small, flat, weather-worn. It was near the sign. "I think I held it before. I don't know why, but I couldn't leave it behind." Karen nodded. "Ah." She placed the stone on the mantel next to the butterfly brooch and Mr. Buttons. Emily watched her do it, then smiled faintly. "I don't want to leave things behind anymore, even if they don't make sense yet." That spring, 2 more girls were identified. Their stories were nearly identical. Removed from school, by forged transfer records. Placed in foster care under the guidance of family guardians who never legally adopted them, but raised them in quiet isolation. One of them, Ava. Age 23, had been told her real parents abandoned her at birth. The other, Claire, had no memory before age 10, but recognized Emily immediately when shown a photo. "That's Madison," she said. "She used to be with me." Emily froze when she heard that they had been together. Not for long, but long enough to remember. Emily testified at a closed-door hearing in Washington later that month. She didn't speak as a victim. She spoke as an advocate. "I was taken," she told the panel, "but I was also made to forget. That's the part no one prepares you for, the part where your whole life is edited by someone else. But memory comes back. And when it does, you don't just get yourself back. You get a choice." One congresswoman reportedly wiped away tears at home. Karen continued teaching. Her students didn't know everything. It's just that she seemed steadier now, softer around the edges. And when someone asked her why she always marked essays in green ink instead of red, she smiled. "My daughter used to hate red." She said it looked like yelling. On the 1-year anniversary of her return, Emily stood once again at the bus stop on Sycamore Avenue. The tree nearby was in bloom. The street was quiet. Karen stood beside her, arm through hers. "I still don't remember what happened in that moment," Emily said. Karen nodded. "It's okay, but I remember you," she whispered. "Even when I didn't know it. Even when I called you a stranger. I think. I always knew you were waiting for me." Karen didn't speak. She just held her tighter in that night. As the city exhaled under a blanket of early spring, Karen framed a new photo above the mantel. It was a Polaroid taken just 2 days earlier. Emily and Claire and Ava, arms around each other, laughing, and beneath it, on a plaque etched in brass. Not lost. Just hidden. Not forgotten. Just waiting. The letter came on a Thursday. A slim envelope, no return address, slipped through the mail slot like a whisper. Karen found it on the rug just after sunrise, tucked among bills and local circulars. The handwriting on the front was careful, deliberate, not Emily's. Inside, a single sheet of paper, typed, no signature. The words stark and surgical. "The 5th girl isn't missing. She's hiding. She remembers enough to stay hidden. She was never adopted. You'll find her at the old seminary, grounds outside Bloomington. She goes by Cassie now." Below that, a name and year. C__, IE-2004. Karen sat down slowly, hands trembling, heart THUDDING. Cassie, the last girl on the list, the only one they hadn't been able to trace. She immediately called Emily. They were on. The road within the hour. Emily drove her knuckles white on the steering wheel, the brooch clipped to her backpack in the passenger seat. She barely spoke, her eyes fixed on the highway, as if afraid something might vanish again if she blinked. Karen had packed water, granola bars, and a printout of the satellite map. The seminary wasn't hard to find, a Gothic shell just outside. Bloomington abandoned since the late 90s. Once a religious boarding school. Now a derelict haunt, tagged with graffiti and rumors of HONTS. No. One had lived there legally in years, but it made sense. Hidden in plain sight, they arrived just before noon. The sun was high, but clouded, casting the crumbling buildings in sickly gray light. The grass was knee-high in places, littered with discarded wrappers and cracked beer bottles. A vandalized sign hung askew at the entrance. Street, Barnabas Seminary. For girls, Emily tightened her coat. "Ready?" "Right." Karen nodded. "Let's find her." The interior of the main building was worse than expected, peeling paint. Broken furniture, shards of glass crunching beneath their boots. They moved quietly, calling out softly, listening for any sign of movement. An hour passed. Nothing. Then, near what used to be the chapel wing, Emily spotted a flicker, a curtain shifting slightly behind a broken window frame. She motioned to Karen, then approached slowly, hands visible, voice calm. "Cassie," she called. "We're not here to hurt you. My name's Emily. I think we were both taken by the same people." Silence. Then, a soft voice from behind the door. Madison. Emily froze. Karen felt her stomach turn. The door creaked open. A young woman stood there, gaunt, but alert. Her eyes were wary, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. Emily exhaled. It's really you. Cassie didn't move. They told me you were a dream. I thought you were one too, Emily said, taking a step forward. But we're real. Cassie looked between them. Her eyes finally landed on Karen. You're her mom? Karen nodded slowly. Yes, I'm Emily's mother, and I want to help you too. You'll let us. Cassie didn't speak again until they were in the car. She sat in the back seat, hunched, watching the road as they drove away from the seminary grounds. They left me there when I was 13, she said finally. Said the system was breaking. Down that someone had talked too much. They were going to start over and I wasn't part of the new plan. Karen turned to look at her in the rearview mirror. Who were they? Cassie shook her head. I don't know all their names. But one of them was a man. Tall, glasses. He had a clipboard. Said I was defective. That I remembered too much. Emily's hands tightened on the wheel. Did he ever say where the others went? Cassie hesitated. Said they were being placed. Properly. Quietly. With families who could pay. I was too much of a risk. Karen felt sick. So they just left you, I think. They thought I'd die out there. Emily glanced at her in the mirror, but you didn't. Cassie looked back at her. Neither did you, back in Milwaukee. Cassie stayed with them in the guest room. She moved like a ghost at first, waking at odd hours, flinching at loud sounds, sleeping with the light on. But slowly, she started to settle. She ate meals, asked questions, laughed once at something on the news. Karen noticed the way Emily kept close to her, not like a caretaker, but like a sister. The bond between them wasn't built on memories. It was built on survival. The case against Sandra Carter alias Diane Larson officially escalated to a federal level. With Cassie's testimony and 2 new signed affidavits from the other recovered girls, the DOJ had enough to pursue charges. But Sandra remained in the wind. Emily kept digging. She used burner email accounts, encrypted message boards, forums for adoptee advocacy, and underground whistleblowers. She didn't say everything, but she said enough. And then one night, a new message appeared. Plain, blunt, logged from a proxy server. You're looking in the wrong direction. It wasn't just Sandra, it was the schools. Check the counselors. Check the withdrawal forms. 2005, 2011, ask for the sealed boxes. There's more than 5. Emily stared at the screen. Then she stood and knocked on Karen's door. We need to go back, she said. To your school. To Jefferson High. It was a Saturday when they returned. Karen had called ahead, secured access to the staff records room. Principal owed her favors, and he didn't ask too many questions. Inside the dusty basement archive, they scanned years of files. Folders stacked high, shelves bowing under weight. Everything before 2012 was still on paper. They found it by accident, a file labeled Retired Staff Danning. Shoved between 2 boxes. Inside, notes, student reports, transfer forms, and 1 sealed manila envelope marked Authorized. Transfers do not release without Superintendent APPAROVAL. Karen opened it. Inside, 27 withdrawal forms. All signed by Mark DANNING. All between 2005 and 2011, all students transferred. To out-of-state programs, none ever enrolled at their supposed destinations. Emily stared at the names. 5 she recognized hers. Cassie's, Ava, Claire, Sophie. But the rest? All missing. All gone, erased. Her voice broke. There were more, so many more. Karen sank into the nearest chair, her hands pressed to her face. Cassie just whispered, they weren't placing us. They were distributing us. The press conference came 2 days later, flanked by child advocacy attorneys and state officials. Karen spoke first. Clear, unwavering, no notes. We thought it was 1 child, then 5. Now we know it was dozens. A manufactured pipeline. A network that used school counselors and closed foster homes to erase children and reassign them under false guardianships. Emily followed her, her hands steady on the podium. My name was changed. My memories were taken. Erase was the truth, and the fact that people kept looking. My mother kept looking, and now I'm asking all of you, help us find the rest. Help us bring them home. By nightfall, the story had gone national again. A month later, they found one of the final names on the list. A boy, now 25, living in Colorado under a different name. He remembered nothing, but he carried a scar. On his right wrist, a crescent shape, just like his childhood records described. And when Emily showed him a drawing the butterflies, he blinked. I used to draw these, said all the time. But I never knew why. The storm came in April. Not rain this time, but headlines. Lawsuits, resignations. The Wisconsin Department of Education launched a full investigation into counselor practices during the missing years. A private foster agency in Ohio was shut down. An arrest was made in Indiana. A woman in her 50s, once a Harvest Home intake coordinator. She had a folder labeled backups. Inside were 16 more names, 16 more children. Emily didn't sleep that night. Karen found her at 3 a.m., curled in the hallway with Mr. Buttons beside her. Too many. Emily whispered. Karen sat down beside her. We'll find them, she said. Not all, but some. And we'll never stop looking. Emily nodded then. She whispered something Karen had never heard her say before. Thank you for never giving up on me. Karen took her hand. You were never gone. Just hidden. The summer of 2025 arrived with a strange stillness in Milwaukee. For once, the wind was quiet. The nights weren't laced with rain. The air didn't press down with tension. But for Karen Holloway, peace still felt like a borrowed coat something. That fit but didn't quite feel like hers yet, the truth was. Ever since Emily returned, every breath Karen took had felt heavier. Not worse. Just more. More real. More tethered to time. To loss. To the kind of love that survived fire, but came back scarred, and now. That love was propelling them forward into something they hadn't anticipated. A war against silence. Because Emily's case, the stolen identity, the vanished years, the forged transfers, wasn't just a tragedy. It was a template. They had cracked a system wide open, and the cracks were still spreading. By June, federal investigators had linked 43 children to atypical withdrawal and replacement patterns between 2005 and 2011. 22 were confirmed to have been placed in false guardianships. 9 had been located, including Emily, Cassie, Ava, Claire, and a boy named Daniel who now worked in outdoor education in Montana, unaware of his real name until the day Emily emailed him. 12 remained missing. The rest, unknown. Karen sat at the dining room table with Emily and Cassie most evenings, building out what they called the map. It wasn't on paper anymore. It was a digital wall of red threads and overlapping data points. Login sheets, foster agency closures, employee transfers, school counselor records, and personal testimonies. Each child's name was marked with a status: found, searching, or unconfirmed. Each one had a story. Each one deserved an ending. One July morning, Karen received a call from a lawyer representing a recently unsealed case from the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. It concerned a now-deceased elementary school principal who had, according to a newly found deposition, signed off on exit transfers for students who didn't technically exist. The deposition was short, vague. But in it, the principal named someone who hadn't appeared in their records before: Douglas Morrow, a freelance educational consultant, not an agency worker, not a social worker, a man paid to handle the paperwork. Emily recognized the name immediately. He came to the clinic once, she said, staring at the file. I don't remember his face, just his briefcase. Brown leather. He had me right. My name over and over on a blank form. Karen exchanged a glance with her. They were practicing your new signature. Emily nodded. I think I was 7 or 8, but they told me I was 10. Cassie, listening from the kitchen doorway, spoke for the first time that morning. He changed mine too, she said. Only I didn't get to pick the name. He handed me a card that said Cassie Lewis and said, "This is who you are now. Practice it." Karen's hands clenched. We need to find him. Merrow's trail was faint. His public footprint ended in 2012 after Harvest Home Services shut down. No recent address, no professional license, no social media presence. But Jensen's old contact in Ohio, are retired now, but still friendly with Karen, dug into DMV records. A hit. Douglas Moreau, now living under the name Craig Daniels, registered in a quiet rural township in northern Pennsylvania. No phone, no known. Family. Emily and Karen packed that night. They left before dawn. The house was a weathered farmhouse tucked behind overgrown hedges and a long gravel driveway. Karen parked a full block away. They approached on foot. Emily wore her hair tied back. No makeup. The butterfly brooch fastened securely to her coat. "I want him to see me," she said quietly. "Exactly as I am." Karen touched her shoulder. "You don't owe him anything." Emily's voice was flat. "I know. That's why I'm ready." The man who opened the door was older than expected. 70s, slouched, wearing a cardigan, and holding a coffee mug like a prop in a staged apology. "Can I help you?" he asked. Emily stepped forward. "Douglas Moreau." His eyes flickered. "I don't know who." "Yes, you do," she interrupted. "You changed my name. Told me I didn't have a past, but I do, and I remember." Moreau said nothing. Karen stepped forward. "You're not under arrest. Not yet. But this will go on record. We're documenting this conversation. I have no doubt law enforcement is coming next." Moreau exhaled, then stepped back. "I'm not proud of what I did," he said. "Not good enough," Emily said. "We want names. We want methods. We want to know how many of us there were." He nodded slowly. "Come in." Inside, the house was cluttered with papers, books, faded maps, and a corkboard covered in yellowing. Notes. He motioned them toward the kitchen table, then opened a drawer and pulled out a worn manila folder. "This was the master list," he said. "The original. We're supposed to destroy it after every successful placement. I kept a copy." He handed it over. Karen opened it. 50-8 names. Emily whispered, "Oh my God." Each entry included a birth name, a new name, transfer date, and a signed guardian. Many had check marks. Others had question marks. 4 had small black X's. Cassie leaned over and read them aloud. "X means presumed dead," Moreau said. "They vanished from the network. We don't know what happened." Karen clutched the file tightly. Who was in charge? Moreau hesitated. "There wasn't just one person," he said. "There was a structure, the Harvest Home Board, educational, intermediaries, foster agency liaisons. People in places who didn't want to ask questions. Were they paying you?" Karen asked. He looked ashamed. "Yes, to handle identities, to move paperwork across jurisdictions, to keep it clean." Emily stared at him and the children. He swallowed. "They were product. That's how they talked about you." Karen nearly stood, but Emily stopped her with a glance. "I don't want to scream," Emily said. "I want to use this to find the others." Moreau nodded. "Then take the file, and take this too." He pulled a USB drive from a small safe beneath the table. "It has backups, scans, notes. I don't know how many will still be useful, but it's everything I have." They drove home in silence. Karen didn't speak until they crossed into Illinois. "We have enough now. This is bigger than any one family." Emily nodded. "Then we make it public. All of it." In August, Emily and Karen stood on stage at the National Child Advocacy Conference in Chicago. Karen went first. She spoke about loss, about 19 years of silence, about every birthday missed, every empty chair, every false hope. Then Emily took the podium. "My name was changed without my permission," she began. "My life was taken and repackaged, but I was never lost. I was hidden. Now I'm unhidden. and I'm not alone. She held up the original butterfly brooch. This was mine before they took me. Still mine. Now I'm using it to mark the way back for everyone else who's still missing. Applause filled the hall. A standing ovation. Karen wept silently. That night, Karen and Emily sat together on the porch. The cicadas were loud and the breeze was gentle. Emily looked up at the sky. I used to think stars were just stories, but they're not. They're proof that light can travel through the darkest places for years and still reach you. Karen touched her hand. You're my light. Emily leaned her head on her mother's shoulder, and for the first time since she was 7 years old, she said it again. I love you bigger than the sky. September returned with gold-edged leaves and headlines. The butterfly brooch had become a symbol. Emily Holloway's story, now fully public, was no longer just a miracle of reunion. It had become a case study, a rallying cry, and, for thousands of families across the country, a terrifying question mark. The files from Douglas Merrow were authenticated. 43 of the names matched children reported missing between 2005 and 2011. 15 were previously believed dead. Several had been removed from missing person databases, altogether based on fraudulent paperwork. The press dubbed it the Holloway Network. A misnomer, Karen thought. It wasn't Emily's name that built the web, it was the names of those who took her. But Emily didn't fight it. She used the spotlight for exactly what she'd promised to find the rest. By October, they had confirmed the identities of 13 more children from the Merrow. File. 10 were alive, 3 weren't. 1 had drowned. At age 9, after a supposed family vacation, another had died in a house fire. The third had taken her own life at 16. In each case, the legal guardians listed were people connected to the same foster agency now shuttered. Untraceable. Emily read each report with a steady gaze. She didn't cry anymore, not for herself, only for them. Karen watched her daughter evolve. Emily, still quiet, still soft-spoken, carried a weight now that no longer bent her. It grounded her, gave her direction. She was studying full-time again, taking night courses in trauma psychology and systems ethics. She worked part-time with a nonprofit that helped reunite families separated by institutional negligence. She even gave a lecture at UW-Madison on trauma and false memory. Karen had attended, sitting in the front row when Emily spoke. Her voice didn't shake, but the storm hadn't passed. The DOJ's investigation had uncovered internal emails between Harvest Home executives and a handful of school officials, including Mark Danning, Douglas Merrow, and a woman no one had yet identified. Her signature was everywhere, on intake forms, on evaluation summaries, on interagency transfer memos, but no full name, no address, no digital trail. Emily became obsessed. She's the one we haven't found, she told Karen one night. And I don't think she disappeared. I think she's still working, somewhere, doing it again. Cassie, sitting nearby, looked up from the couch. Maybe she's recruiting, starting fresh. Emily stared at her. Then we start hunting. They began with the records from the final year, 2011. 2 names had been crossed off in Merrow's file with ink that looked fresh compared to the rest. One was Darla Temple, confirmed alive in Nevada. Adopted at age 11, still believed she had been found abandoned. The other was less clear. T. Grover, no age, no new name listed, just a transfer location. St. Thaddeus Transitional Academy, Oregon. Karen raised her eyebrows. What kind of school is that? Cassie's voice was flat. It's not. Emily had already opened her laptop. It's a residential behavior program. Closed door, faith-based. Opened in 2010, shut down in 2013 for allegations of abuse. 2 lawsuits. Karen swallowed, and no one followed up. Because they said the kids weren't real. Ghost records, anonymous placements. No social security numbers. Cassie muttered, "That sounds familiar." Emily traveled to Oregon alone. She walked the grounds of St. Thaddeus, a compound now converted into a private rehab facility. She spoke to former staff, looked through public records, combed through archived forum posts from teens who once claimed to be residents. And on her third day there, she found a woman in a retirement home who had worked in food service. During the academy's final year, she always carried a clipboard, the woman said. Tight bun. Looked through you like you weren't worth the air. Emily leaned forward. Did she go by the name SK? The woman frowned. No, I think. Her name was Seraphine Kincaid. Emily stopped breathing. That name had never appeared in the files. She brought the name back to Karen. Together, they contacted their DOJ liaison. It took a week of legal maneuvering. Then finally, confirmation. Seraphine Kincaid, age 62, former. Administrator at multiple behavioral facilities across 5 states. Never married. No children. No clear address. A phantom with a paper trail. But someone had found her. One of the girls. Emily had helped to recognize the name. She remembered it whispered through thin walls. She picks the ones who can be reshaped. Emily stared. At the screen, she's still out there. They traced Seraphine's last known location to a nonprofit education board in Montana. It had folded quietly in 2018, then dashed nothing, until Karen noticed something small in one of the marrow. USB spreadsheets, a file marked lullabies_5.m4a with no context. She opened it. A voice, HUMMED. Karen froze. It was the lullaby, the same one she had made up. The one only Emily should know, but this voice wasn't Karen's. Or Emily's. It was a stranger. Off-key. Slower, as if rehearsing. Emily leaned closer. She learned it. She practiced it. She used it to control me. Kranz. Skin went cold. Who would do that? Emily's reply was quiet. Someone who wanted to play mother. They dug deeper. Seraphine had used 5 known aliases in the last 20 years. They matched them to employment records, property purchases, and closed adoptions, all connected. One of the properties had just been listed for sale outside Duluth, Minnesota. Karen stared at the real estate listing. Let's go, she said. Emily nodded. We bring backup this time. The house was secluded, modest, with a red tin roof and ivy growing wild along the eastern wall. The day they arrived, the realtor's car was parked out front, but she hadn't gone inside. The key was. Missing Karen called the DOJ contact. Within an hour, 2 agents arrived. They entered together. The house was empty at first. Then, in the attic, they found boxes neatly stacked, labeled in numerical order. Inside, notebooks, each with a child's name, each one filled with writing. Some were essays, some were dictated statements. Others were punishments, written hundreds of times. Emily pulled one from the stack labeled Emily M. Control Work 7. The first page read, I do not need my mother. I am safe where I am. Emily closed the notebook. Her hands were steady. The voice wasn't. She made me write that. Karen wrapped an arm around her. Behind them, one of the agents pulled down a final box smaller, marked only with the initials S.K. inside. Photos, documents, a single cassette tape, and a list 20. More names? The discovery of the attic files exploded everything. The DOJ sealed the Duluth property immediately. Agents transported the materials to a secure archive in D.C. for forensic review. But Karen and Emily, along with their legal liaison, were granted access to digital scans within days. There were 20 names on the final list. 8 were already known. 12 were not, and worse. 7 of those 12 were completely unaccounted for. No missing person reports, no school records, no foster system files. They were invisible. Ghost children that had never officially existed. Emily stared at the list with a growing sense of nausea. Each entry was labeled with a name, a date of removal, and a status. Besides 7 of them, no identity created. What does that mean? Karen asked, her voice hollow. Cassie answered from behind her. It means they were taken, but they never made it through the rebranding process. No new names, no transfers. They disappeared before the lie could be completed. Emily whispered. They erased them, then forgot. Karen closed her eyes. Someone made sure they wouldn't be found. That night, Emily lay awake. In bed with the list open on her laptop, she traced each name with the tip of her finger like a prayer, like a spell, like a promise. One name jumped out. Leah, age 6, removed 2011. No identity created. Status, unknown. There was no last name, no location, just a single note in the margin. Unfit, would not bond. Emily sat up slowly. She felt the air leave her lungs. She remembered hearing that phrase. Not from Seraphine, from another woman. Cold voice, cropped hair, a long beige coat. The memory wasn't clear, but it was there, buried. She remembered watching a girl through. A doorway, small, pale, crying into a blanket. She doesn't respond. We'll need to move her. Emily's pulse pounded. She hadn't remembered that girl before, not in any flashback, not in dreams. But now, she remembered her name. Leah. She called Karen into her room and told her everything. Karen listened with that quiet iron patience she had learned across years of grief and the slow return of hope. She was there with me, Emily said. In the first place, before they changed my name, for Seraphine. Karen looked at the screen. She could still be alive. She was younger than me. She wouldn't be older than 20 now. And if they never created an identity, might still be hiding. Karen met her daughter's eyes. Then we look for her. With DOJ permission, Emily released Leah's partial profile to the Missing Children Recovery Coalition. A sketch artist recreated her likely features at 20. Years old, a basic age progression, soft jawline, narrow shoulders, hazel eyes. The image went up on message boards, survivor forums. Local outreach lists. 2 weeks passed. Nothing. Then one night, Emily received a message through a secure anonymous tip line she'd set up months earlier. The message had no name, just, "I think I know the girl you're looking for. She goes by Ash. Lives in a squat near Gary, Indiana. Doesn't talk to anyone. Draws butterflies on the walls." Thought it was just a thing. Now I'm not sure. Emily read it 3 times before dialing Karen an hour later. They were driving south. They found the squat behind a burned-out convenience store. The wind off Lake Michigan made everything colder than it should have been. It smelled like old rotten garbage. Inside, mattresses on the floor, empty beer cans, single propane heater flickering weakly, and on the far wall hundreds of butterflies. Drawn in crayon and charcoal, layered, stacked, crawling up toward the ceiling like a swarm trying to escape. Cassie stood near the entrance, frozen. That's her. A girl, barely 20, sat in the far corner, her hair in uneven tangles, her sweatshirt torn at the sleeves. She didn't look up. Karen approached first. "Leah," she asked softly. The girl flinched. Emily crouched down. "We're not here to hurt you, I think. I think you knew me a long time ago. My name is Emily. They used to call me Madison." The girl looked up, and there it was. Recognition. A long, aching silence stretched between them. Then Leah whispered, "You used to hum?" Emily nodded. "You used to press your face into your blanket. Pink with stars. You were always cold." Leah blinked slowly. "I remember you." Kieran exhaled. Leah Hush was brought into protective custody the next day. She was diagnosed with PTSD, malnutrition, and a severe speech delay from years of isolation and trauma. But she was alive. She was real. When the DOJ cross-checked her DNA with a cold case out of Iowa, they found the match. Leah Thomas, age 6. Disappeared in 2011 from a shelter with no security footage and no follow-up investigation. Her parents had died in a car crash 2 years before, had been passed through 3 foster homes, then vanished. Emily stayed with her during the first 2 nights at the clinic. She read to her, held her hand, hummed softly. Leah didn't speak much, but when she did, she whispered, "The butterflies don't fly away anymore." Emily cried quietly. "They don't have to." Back in Milwaukee, Emily updated the map. Leah's icon turned from searching to found. Cassie, a fully part of the investigative team, reviewed their remaining names with the DOJ's Special Task Force. They had confirmed 18 children alive for deceased. 14 still unaccounted for, but now, with Marrow's files, Seraphine's list, and Leah's reappearance. The pattern had become undeniable. Karen stood beside the corkboard. This wasn't just a scheme, she said. It was a pipeline. They weren't stealing children, Emily added. They were. Repurposing them, molding them into roles. Into lives that benefited someone else. And what about the ones? Who couldn't be molded? Cassie asked. No one answered. Then came the final blow. A second tape hidden inside one of the notebooks from the NDE. Quez. DECRYPTED. It had a date. October 5th, 2005. The day before. Emily vanished. It was an audio recording. Seraphine's. Voice, calm, measured. The Holloway girl will be removed tomorrow. The mother is predictable. Routine. The counselor has arranged the paperwork. Will initiate identity restructuring within 72 hours. Then, target has already formed maternal imprint. Will need to dismantle emotional tethering early. Karen dropped the headphones. Emily stood still, staring. They planned it, Karen whispered, like a science experiment. Emily's eyes were wet, but she didn't flinch. I remember that phrase, emotional tethering. They used it like it was dangerous. It's like love was an infection. Karen's voice broke. You weren't a girl to them. You were a project. Emily's reply was a whisper. Not anymore. That night, Emily sat alone at the kitchen table. She opened her journal. She wrote, I am not their result. I am not their silence. I am the noise they can't suppress. I am the memory they tried to erase. I am still here. She folded the paper and placed it. Inside the brooch, then she stood and she waited for morning, because morning meant light. And light meant the next name, the next door, the next return. The morning light fell in ribbons through the Holloway's living room window. Karen sat with a cup of tea. Her fingers curled around the warm ceramic as she stared at the corkboard. It was fuller now, dozens of faces, arrows, strings, notes, red dots turned green. The map had grown, but the empty spaces still clawed at her. 14 children remained unaccounted for. Some might never be found, but they weren't forgotten. Emily stood across the room, packing a canvas bag. Inside, the brooch, a fresh notebook. A flash drive with copies of every testimony they'd gathered, and the butterfly stone Leah had given her last week. A talisman. Cassie entered from the hallway, hair still damp from a shower. You ready? She asked. Emily nodded. Right, time to tell the world. The National Inquiry on Exploited Children opened its hearings in D.C. that week. It was the largest closed-door federal probe into systemic child trafficking in over 20 years. And for the first time, it named schools, nonprofits, adoption liaisons, and my names Seraphine, Kincaid, and Douglas Moreau. On the third day, Emily testified again. She sat at the center of a long, curved table, flanked by federal attorneys, child psychologists, and senators who looked more shaken with each hour of testimony. My name was Emily Holloway, she began. Then it was Madison Carter. And I was never either of those things, not really. What I was stolen. She told him about the house, about the notebook, punishments, about the lullabies that weren't her mother's voice, but someone pretending. To be, I wasn't trafficked for money, she said. It's not in the way people expect. I wasn't sold. I was reassigned. They erased my name, my history, my pain, and they gave me a script. A false life. And if I hadn't remembered, if my mother hadn't fought for 19 years, I would have disappeared for good. But I came back. There was silence. Then applause. Not protocol. It's not allowed. But no one stopped it. In the weeks that followed, the DOJ released their full interim report. 50-8 names. 21 found alive. 5 confirmed dead. The rest cases pending. They dismantled the last remaining shell of Harvest Home's nonprofit license. A private foundation in Nebraska was dissolved. 2 school districts in Wisconsin were placed under federal review, One woman, an administrator at a charter school in Arizona, was arrested for possession of records linked to 4 unaccounted-for names. She said nothing during her arraignment, but in her purse they found a folded slip of paper with a list. At home, Karen and Emily hosted a reunion. Ava, Claire, Daniel, and Cassie sat around the kitchen table, telling stories they couldn't quite verify but knew in their bones were real. Leah came too. She had started speaking more, full sentences now. She was in therapy, living with a foster mother in Madison who had worked with trauma survivors for years. She brought a drawing. 6 butterflies. No faces, but one had a small scar on the wing. She gave it to Emily. "You're the one who came back," Leah said. "You showed me how." Emily hugged her gently. "You were always coming back. You just didn't know it yet." Karen watched the scene from the doorway. Her kitchen, once so quiet, once so full of grief, was now loud. With life, not laughter, always. But truth, connection, reclamation. The house felt full again. But not just because Emily had returned, because she had pulled others with her. That fall, Emily enrolled full-time in graduate school for trauma and justice studies. Her thesis proposal was already accepted. Restorative identity. Healing after systemic erasure. She was writing not just for herself, but for everyone who'd never been found. Karen returned to part-time teaching. She spoke at events now, education reform panels, family reunification conferences. People knew her name, her story. But she always said the same thing when introduced. "I'm just a mother who refused to stop looking." In December, on the 2-year anniversary of Emily's return, Karen gave her a wrapped box. Inside, a single photograph. It had been edited from a home video still. Emily at 6, sitting at the bus stop, smiling, scarf crooked, Karen beside her, hand resting on her back. The moment before she vanished, they had been able to sharpen it, colorize it. The sky behind them was pale blue. Bare branches framed the shot. It looked like an ordinary morning. Emily stared at the photo for a long time. Then she whispered, "I remember that day." Karen's heart skipped. "Not all of it," Emily continued. "Just how it felt. Safe." Before, Karen pulled her into a hug. "You're safe now," she said. "You're home." That night, Emily made one final update to the map. She turned her own name from searching to found. Then she wrote a single line across the bottom of the board. "There are more, and I'm still looking."